Majd ad-Dīn Usama ibn Murshid ibn ʿAlī ibn Munqidh al-Kināni al-Kalbi was a medieval Muslim poet, author, faris, and diplomat from the Banu Munqidh dynasty of Shaizar in northern Syria. His life coincided with the rise of several medieval Muslim dynasties, the arrival of the First Crusade, and the establishment of the crusader states. He was the nephew and potential successor of the emir of Shaizar, but was exiled in 1131 and spent the rest of his life serving other leaders. He was a courtier to the Burids, Zengids, and Ayyubids in Damascus, serving the Zengi, ad-Dīn, and Saladin over a period of almost 50 years. He also served the Fatimid court in Cairo, as well as the Ayyubids in His and Kaifa. He traveled extensively in Arab lands, visiting Egypt, Syria, Palestine and along the Tigris River, and went on pilgrimage to Mecca. He often meddled in the politics of the courts in which he served, and he was exiled from both Damascus and Cairo. During and immediately after his life, he was most famous as a poet and adib. He wrote many poetry anthologies, such as the Kitab al-Ashar, Lubab al-Adab, and al-Manazil Waldiyar, and collections of his own original poetry. In modern times, he is remembered more for his Kitab al-Ishaba, which contains lengthy descriptions of the crusaders, whom he interacted with on many occasions, and some of whom he considered friends. Most of his family was killed in an earthquake at Shaizar in 1157. He died in Damascus in 1188, at the age of 93. Early life. Usama was the son of Murshid, and the nephew of Nasser, emir of Shaizar. Shaizar was seen as a strategically important site and the gateway to end-to-end control in Assyria. The Arabs initially conquered Shaizar during the Muslim conquest of the Levant in 637. Due to its importance, it exchanged hands numerous times between the Arabs and Byzantines, who regained it in 999. In 1025 the Banu Munqidh tribe were given an allocation of land beside Shaizar by the ruler of Hama, Salah al-Murtays. Over time they expanded the lands, building fortifications and castles until Usama's grandfather Is-al-Dawla al-Muhif Nasser retook it in 1180. When Nasser died in 1098, Usama's father, Majd al-Din Abi Salama Murshid, became the emir of Shaizar and the surrounding cities. However, he soon gave up his position to Usama's uncle, Sultan, since Murshid was more interested in studying religion, writing the Quran and hunting than matters of politics. During Usama's life and when his uncle ruled, Shaizar was attacked numerous times by Banu Munqidh in Aleppo, the Assassins sect, the Byzantines and the Crusaders. It was struck with siege engines for 10 days in 1137 by the Byzantines, and the Crusaders attempted on many occasions to storm it. However, due to its natural fortifications along with castles and walls, it never fell. As a child, Usama was the second of 4 boys and raised by his nurse, Lula, who had also raised his father and would later raise Usama's own children. He was encouraged by his father to memorize the Quran, and was also tutored by scholars such as Ibn Munira of Kafat ibn Abu Abdullah al-Tulaychili of Toledo. He spent much of his youth hunting with his family, partly as recreation and certainly as warrior training for battle as part of Fur'iziyah. He also had much direct experience of battle against the neighboring Crusader county of Tripoli and Principality of Antioch, hostile Muslim neighbors in Hama, Homs, and elsewhere, and Hashashan, who had established a base near Shaizar. Sultan did not initially have any male heirs, and it is possible that Usama expected to succeed him. He certainly singled him out among his brothers by teaching him, tutoring him in the ways of war and hunting. He even favored him for personal missions and as a representative. However, after Sultan had his own son, he no longer appreciated the presence of Usama and Murshid's other sons. According to Usama, Sultan was jealous after a particularly successful lion hunt in 1131 when he entered the town with a large lion head in his arms as a hunting trophy. When his grandmother saw this, she warned him about the effect this could have on his uncle. However, despite this, he still spoke well of his uncle on a few occasions in his autobiography and highlighted his noble actions. Usama ultimately left Shaizar temporarily in 1129, and after his father died in 1137, his exile became permanent. His uncle died in 1154, and his son, Taj al-Dawla Nasser al-Din Muhammad, inherited the castle. However, he was the last of the line when an earthquake in 1157 struck the area, killing scores. Damascus and Egypt. Usama went to Homs, where he was taken captive in a battle against Zengi, the Atabeg of Mosul and Aleppo, who had just captured nearby Hama. After his capture, he entered Zengi's service, and traveled throughout northern Syria, Iraq, and Armenia fighting against Zengi's enemies, including the Abbasid Caliph outside Baghdad in 1132. In 1135 he returned to the south to Hama, where one of Zengi's generals, ʿAlī, was appointed governor. He returned to Shaizar when his father died in May 1137, and again in April 1138 when Byzantine Emperor John II Comnenus besieged the city. The emperor's siege of Shaizar was unsuccessful, but Shaizar was heavily damaged. After the siege, Usama left Zengi's service and went to Damascus, which was ruled by Mu'in ad-Din Unur, the Atabeg of the Burid dynasty. Zengi was determined to conquer Damascus, so Usama and Unur turned to the Crusader kingdom of Jerusalem for help. Usama was sent on a preliminary visit to Jerusalem in 1138, and in 1139 Zengi captured Baalbek in Damascene territory. In 1140 Unur sent Usama back to Jerusalem to conclude a treaty with the Crusaders, and both he and Unur visited the new allies numerous times between 1140 and 1143. Afterwards, Usama was suspected of being involved in a plot against Unur, and he fled Damascus for Fatimid Cairo in November 1144. In Cairo, he became a wealthy courtier, but he was involved in plots and conspiracies there as well. The young Arizona Zafir became caliph in 1149, and Ibn as-Salah became vizier, with Usama as one of his advisors. As-Salah sent Usama to negotiate an alliance against the Crusaders with Zengi's son Nur ad-Din, but the negotiations failed. Usama took part in battles with the Crusaders outside of Ascalon on his way back to Egypt, and after he left, his brother ʿAlī was killed at Gaza. Back in Egypt, as-Salah was assassinated in 1153 by his son Abbas, Abbas's son Nasser, and Caliph Arizona Zafir, who, according to Usama, was Nasser's lover. 13th century historian Ibn al-Athir says that Usama was the instigator of this plot. Usama may also have been behind the assassination of Arizona Zafir by Abbas in 1154. Arizona Zafir's relatives called upon a supporter, Ibn Razik, who chased Abbas out of Cairo, and Usama followed him. He lost his possessions in Cairo, and on the way to Damascus his retinue was attacked by the Crusaders and Bedouin nomads. But in June 1154 he safely reached Damascus, which had recently been captured by Nur ad-Din. Ibn Razik tried to persuade him to come back, as the rest of his family was still in Cairo, but Usama was able to bring them to Damascus through Crusader territory in 1156. The Crusaders promised to transport them safely, but they were attacked and pillaged, and Usama lost his entire library. Later years. In 1157, Shaizar was destroyed by an earthquake, killing almost all of Usama's relatives. They were for the circumcision of the son of his cousin Muhammad, who had recently succeeded Sultan as emir. The only survivor was Muhammad's wife. Usama had remained in Damascus, and after the destruction of his homeland he remained there in semi-retirement. He went on pilgrimage to Mecca in 1160, then went on campaign against the Crusaders with ad-Dīn in 1162, and was at the Battle of Haram in 1164. That year, Usama left ad-Dīn's service and went north to the court of Kara Arslan, the Turkid emir of His. Usama's life in His is very obscure, but he traveled throughout the region, and probably wrote many of his works there. In 1174, Usama was invited to Damascus to serve Saladin, who had succeeded ad-Dīn earlier that year and was a friend of Usama's son Murhab. Usama lived in semi-retirement, as he did in His, and often met with Saladin to discuss literature and warfare. He may have also taught poetry and hadith in Damascus, and held poetry salons for Saladin and his chief men, including al-Qaidi al-Fadl and Majd ad-Din al-Isfahani. He died on November 17, 1188. He was buried in Damascus on Mount Kashiyun, although the tomb is now lost. Family. Usama had three brothers: Muhammad, ʿAlī, and Munqidh. His cousin, also named Muhammad, succeeded Usama's uncle Sultan as emir of Shaizar. He had a son, Murhab, in 1126, and another son, Abu Bakr, who died as a child. He had a daughter, Farwa, in His in 1166. He mentions other children, but the names and the name of his wife or wives are unknown. The picture he painted of his father was of a pious religious man who was not interested in the affairs of this world. He would spend most of his time reading the Quran, fasting and hunting during the day, and at night would copy the Quran. He also recounted a few battles his father joined against the Crusaders in his autobiography Kitab al-Itibar. Religion. It is sometimes assumed that Usama was Shiite because he often writes about ʿAlī. His family cooperated with the Fatimids and other Shiite dynasties, and he himself served the Fatimids in Egypt. Philip K. He thought he had a secret sympathy with the Shiites. Paul M. Cobb does not think there is enough evidence one way or the other, but believes he was probably Sunni with acceptable Shiite tendencies. Robert Irwin thinks the Banu Munqidh were 12 Shiites, and that another clue to Usama's Shiism is his dislike of jihad, which was not a Shiite doctrine. Usama also admired Christian monks and holy men, and was disturbed that Muslims were not as pious as Christians. He was very fond of Sufis when he first learned about them late in his life in Damascus. Works. Around 1171 in His, Usama wrote the Kitab al-Ashar, a poetry anthology about famous walking sticks and other stuffs, and al-Manazil Waldiyyar. In Damascus in the early 1180s he wrote another anthology, the Lubab al-Adab, Instructions on Living a Properly Cultured Life. He is most famous for the Kitab al-Ishaba, which was written as a gift to Saladin around 1183. It is not exactly a memoir, as Philip Hitti translated the title, although it does include many autobiographical details that are incidental to the main point. It was meant to be a book of examples from which to draw lessons. In 1880, Hartwig Derenberg was the first to discover the Kitab al-Ishaba, which survived in only one manuscript, in the possession of the Escorial monastery near Madrid. Derenberg was also the first to produce an Arabic edition, a biography of Usama, and a French translation. In 1930, Hitti produced an improved Arabic edition, and an English translation. Kashim's Samurai produced another Arabic edition in 1987. Usama wrote in Middle Arabic, a less formal style of classical Arabic. Reputation. Usama was known for meddling in the business of others, rather than commanding any power of his own. As the Encyclopedia of Islam says, his career was a troubled one, and for this his own actions were surely responsible in large part to contemporary and later medieval Muslims. However, he was best remembered for his poetry and his poetry anthologies. Ibn Khaldun, author of a 14th-century biographical dictionary, calls him one of the most powerful, learned, and intrepid members of the family, and speaks at great length about his poetry. He was also known for his military and hunting exploits. Ibn al-Athir described him as the ultimate of bravery, regarding his presence at the Battle of Haram. For modern readers, he is most famous for the Kitab al-Ichaba and his descriptions of life in Syria during the early Crusades. The disjointed nature of the work has given him a reputation as a senile rambler, although it is actually written with an anthological structure, with humorous or moralistic tales that are not meant to proceed chronologically, as a true autobiography would. Since this style of literature, adab in Arabic, does not necessarily have to be factual, historians are quick to point out that Usama's historical material cannot always be trusted. Usama's anecdotes about the Crusades are sometimes obvious jokes, exaggerating their otherness to entertain his Muslim audience. As Carol Hillenbrand wrote, it would be dangerously misleading to take the evidence of his book at its face value. Bibliography. Editions and translations of Usama's works. Usama ibn Munqidh, un emir Syrian au premier siècle des Croisades, ed. Hartwig Derenberg, Paris, 1889. An Arab-Syrian gentleman and warrior in the period of the Crusades. Memoirs of Usama ibn Munqidh. Trans Philip K. Hitti, New York, 1929. Memoirs entitled Kitab al-Ichaba, ed. Philip K. Hitti, Princeton University Press, 1930. Lubab al-Adab, ed. A.M. Shakir, Cairo, Maktabat Louis Sarkis, 1935. Divan Usama ibn Munqidh, ed. A. Badawi and H. Abd al-Majid, Cairo, Wizarat al-Ma'arif al-Umayyah, 1953. Kitab al-Manazil Waldiyar, ed. M. Hijazi, Cairo, Al-Majlis al-Lshun al-Islamiyya, 1968. Kitab al-Ashar, ed. Hassan Abbas, Alexandria, al-Hayat al-Masriya al-Amali al-Kitab, 1978. Al-Badi, Fi al-Badi, ed. A. Mahana, Beirut, Noah al-Kutab al-Hilmiya, 1987. Kitab al-Ichaba, ed. Kashim's Samurai, Riyadh, 1987. Usama ibn Munqidh's Book of the Star, Autobiographical and Historical Excerpts, trans. Paul M. Kopp, Al-Masak, Islam and the Medieval Mediterranean, 17. Usama ibn Munqidh's Kernels of Refinement, Autobiographical and Historical Excerpts, trans. Paul M. Kopp, Al-Masak, Islam and the Medieval Mediterranean, 18. The Book of Contemplation, Islam and the Crusades, trans. Paul M. Kopp, Penguin Classics, 2008. Secondary works. Ibn Khaldun's Biographical Dictionary, trans. William McGuckin, Baron Duslane, Volume 1, Paris, 1842. Hassan Abbas, Usama ibn Munqidh, Hayatuhu wa Athruhu, Cairo, Al-Hayat al-Masriya al-Amali al-Kitab, 1981. Niall Christie, Just a Bunch of Dirty Stories. Women in the Memoirs of Usama ibn Munqidh, Eastward Bound Travel and Travellers, 1050–1550, ed. Rosamund Allen, Manchester, Manchester University Press, 2004, pp. 71–87. Paul M. Cobb, Usāma ibn Munqidh, warrior poet in the Age of Crusades, Oxford, One World, 2005. Paul M. Cobb, Infidel Dogs, Hunting Crusaders with Usāma ibn Munqidh. Crusade 6. Lawrence I. Conrad, Usāma ibn Munqidh and other witnesses to Frankish and Islamic medicine in the era of the Crusades. Medicine in Jerusalem throughout the ages, ed. Zohar Amare al. Tel Aviv, CG Foundation, 1999. Carroll, Hill and Brand, The Crusades, Islamic Perspectives. Routledge, 2000. R.S. Humphreys, Munqidh, Banu. Encyclopedia of Islam, 2nd, ed., Volume 7. Robert Irwin, Usāma ibn Munqidh, an Arab-Syrian gentleman at the time of the Crusades, reconsidered. The Crusades and the Sources, essays presented to Bernard Hamilton, ed. John France, William G. Zajac, pp. 71-87. Adnan Hussein, Wondrous Crusade Encounters. Usāma ibn Munqidh's Book of Learning by Example, in Jason Glenn, The Middle Ages in Text and Texture, Reflections on Medieval Sources. D.W. Moray, The Genius of Usāma ibn Munqidh, Aspects of Kitab al-Ijaba by Usāma ibn Munqidh. Working paper. University of Durham, Center for Middle Eastern and Islamic Studies, Durham, 1987. I. Sheng, Usāma ibn Munqidh's Memoirs. Some Further Light on Muslim Middle Arabic. Journal of Semitic Studies 17, and Journal of Semitic Studies 18. G.R. Smith, A New Translation of Certain Passages of the Hunting section of Usāma ibn Munqidh's Ijaba. Journal of Semitic Studies 26. Stephen Wild, Open Questions, New Light, Usāma ibn Munqidh's account of his battles against Muslims and Franks, the Frankish Wars and their influence on Palestine, ed. Khalil Athamina and Roger Heacock, pp. 9-29. The Chronicle of Ibn al-Atir for the Crusading Period from Al-Kamil al-Tariq. Part 2. The years 541-589 1146-1193. The Age of Nur al-Din and Saladin. Trans. D.S. Richards. Crusade Texts in Translation 15. Aldershot Ashgate, 2007.